I'm Steve Dempsey with the Bay Area News Group, and welcome to our broadcast on the Raiders and their stadium situation for the future. And we do ask the question, are we going to see the Raiders leaving Oakland? Maybe, maybe not. Covering the story for Bay Area News Group that's really made for reality TV has been Oakland City writer Matt Artz. And he will give us a little insight on what's going on. Matt, thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Right. Also joining us is sports business consultant Andy Dolich, who knows a great deal about team operations. He's a former president of the Warriors, chief operating executive with the 49ers, a former executive with the A's for 14 seasons, and with the Memphis Grizzlies, he was president of business operations and was part of the team that planned the move from Vancouver to Memphis and also building FedEx Forum. Andy, thank you for joining us.
It's great. I'm probably one of the only people that moved from one country to another. Matt, I don't think the Raiders have talked about another country, have they?
Is Irwindale another country? I don't
know. Well, this has been quite a ride for Raiders fans since the announcement came from Carson about a shared stadium that would marry the Raiders and division rival Chargers as dual tenants. That came as Stan Kroenke, owner of the Rams, purchased land in Inglewood with an intent to move his team to Southern California. So now that presented the possibility of 3 teams going to Los Angeles or the Los Angeles area. Then came a parade of possible locations and proposals for the Raiders to stay in Oakland, but nothing concrete, especially when it came to financing. So with deadlines coming up, a crucial owners meeting in January, we've had a few developments just in the past week. And Matt, can you bring us up to speed on what's going on?
Sure. And again, it's still, nothing is definitive at this point, and it's still very much a guessing game as to what is going to happen and which team or teams will end up in Los Angeles. I think coming off of the last owners meeting, it seems as if, one, they want to make a decision in January, and they meet January 12th. It looks as if they're leaning towards 2 teams instead of 1 team in Los Angeles. And the team that seems most likely to be able to move at this point is the Chargers. I think those are the things that really came out of the last owners meeting. Now the Chargers, of course, are teaming up with the Raiders on a potential stadium in Carson, and it remains really uncertain whether or not the Raiders will get permission to go as well. And the NFL still hasn't given up on Oakland, and we reported, and other outlets reported this week, that the NFL has even talked about really helping develop a stadium in Oakland next to the Coliseum. And in some ways, I think that could be an olive branch to the city to say, we haven't given up on you, keep working on the stadium, perhaps, give a little more public resources than you're considering. So I think in some sense, the NFL continuing to work with the Raiders is more kind of taking that carrot approach and kind of encourage the city to not give up on the Raiders and to maybe, provide a little more in terms of keeping the team. But the idea of the NFL actually building a stadium in Oakland, I think, still seems, to me, somewhat unlikely. And they had considered developing a stadium in Los Angeles, but that is, the second largest market in the country. There was no stadium there. The idea of building, the idea of the league building a stadium, in the Bay Area market that already has a stadium that would essentially compete with the stadium that was built by another team, that, maybe it could happen, but it doesn't seem like the most likely scenario.
Well, Andy, what do you think? Does Oakland, is this a last chance deal for Oakland to come through?
I don't necessarily think final last is an operative word in all this. Now, it would be wonderful if we were sitting in league meetings who are next to owners who are having conference calls right now talking about this. What I believe is there's no envelope marked secret anyplace, not at NFL headquarters, not in any of the team ownership offices, to say how the Los Angeles scenario is going to work out. And we've seen from the last owners meeting that some owners were quoted as saying, when we go into this next meeting, no matter how long it takes, we'll reach a resolution. That's easy to say. I happen to view this scenario. You literally have 5 cities involved in this. The 3 current cities, the 2 locations in Inglewood and Carson that want to attract teams. You have multiple ownerships. You have the league. You have mayor's offices, state legislatures, county councils, billionaire business people. So to me, it's like solving a Rubik's Cube with a blindfold while suffering from vertigo. And if somebody could do that quickly, there are no secrets or people would know about it, especially when you have a Pulitzer Prize quality writer, reporter, journalist like Matt. He would know what was happening. My reality is pretty simple. Oakland is the only location in North America that houses 3 major professional sports. Based upon the vote last night in San Francisco, I think it's pretty certain, and has been for a while, that the Warriors are leaving Oakland. That's reality. The Raiders, to me, have been like the Raiders of the Lost Park. We've been dealing with this not for days or weeks or months, but literally years. I happened to be with the A's when the Raiders left to go to LA, and then they came back to Oakland. And of course, another major factor is, what are the plans for the Oakland A's? What are they going to do, and how does that impact on all of this? I know this, at least from my time working for sports organizations and the Niners. The NFL is going to do everything in its power on behalf of ownership to maximize the asset appreciation of every one of its franchises. And that is ultimately, I think, how they'll make the decision as to whether it's 1 team in LA or 2. I'm with Matt. I absolutely do not believe it will be 3. And I absolutely do not believe there will be a new ground-up multi-billion-dollar football stadium in the Bay Area. If we see the success of the Jets and the Giants, what the league really wanted between the Niners and the Raiders several years ago, which didn't happen, play in 1 stadium at Levi's, and the combined stadium discussions either in Inglewood or Carson. So with all of that, it does make a long-standing Groundhog Day novel of the gift that keeps on giving. Whither go the Bedouin Raiders?
Well, Matt, talk a little bit about the deadlines that Roger Goodell set. I guess one was the 28th and the other was the 30th. What is he looking for?
It's now the 30th, and I think the only reason they moved it back 2 days is they realized the 28th was a Monday after the Christmas holiday, and they figured that wasn't appropriate, so now it's the 30th. They want final, fully approved stadium financing plans that are quote-unquote actionable, which means they can take that money essentially to the bank. I think it's really geared towards St. Louis. St. Louis is really the only one of the 3 cities that could actually produce such a plan, and there's still votes to be had in the city and in the state legislature to approve such a plan. I think Roger Goodell said a week or so ago that San Diego couldn't produce a plan at this point because, for one, San Diego, any public financing from San Diego would have to be approved by a ballot, and there's not going to be a ballot between now and December 30th. And in Oakland, the mayor herself has said that there is no way the city can produce any kind of actionable financing plan by then as well. So really, in essence, it's a chance to see what St. Louis can bring to the table before the owners meet again.
Andy, do you agree with that? It seems like Goodell didn't really give Oakland and San Diego much of a chance there with setting this quick deadline. And then I understand there's a fast turnaround with the owners meeting in January, but still, it seems to me that Oakland and San Diego didn't have much of a chance meeting this deadline.
I don't believe that it's really been such a short time frame. I mean, anybody who has followed this scenario over the last few years knew that there would ultimately be, a finish line to this. When that happens still remains to be seen, but the league has set some deadlines, but you can see it coming for years. And, I totally agree with Matt in terms of the reality that St. Louis has the closest to an actionable plan. Oakland does not, and San Diego is probably in the middle, but the Chargers ownership has been very direct that they don't believe there's anything that San Diego could do to keep them in downtown San Diego. So it's really these discussions that are occurring now with the committee, with other owners who are voting. It's like the presidential election. Are you red? Are you blue? Are you Inglewood? Are you Carson? Are you to keep everybody where they are? That's a complicated situation when you're talking about the fluid that flows through the veins of sports, which is green. And this is hundreds of millions and ultimately billions of dollars.
Andy, talk a little bit about the St. Louis deal. It looks like, I mean, they have a name in place. I think it's National Car Rental is the sponsor of the stadium, but it's going to take quite a bit of public funds. Talk about how a city like St. Louis can redirect public funds much easier than maybe a city like Oakland.
Well, Oakland is part of California, part of Northern California. It's a very crowded marketplace. The reality is, and I can speak from personal experience, when we moved the Grizzlies from Vancouver to Memphis, we built what I'm very proud of. The team built a quality arena, which cost about $250 million. So real estate numbers were very low. Construction didn't cost that much. Our owner, the late Michael Heisley, really didn't pay much, if anything, for that. It was all public money. Why? Because we were becoming Memphis's first and only major professional team. They had AAA baseball. Now, St. Louis has a quality background in sports, in hockey, one of the greatest baseball franchises with terrific fan avidity, and the Rams, but they don't have 8 pro sports teams like we have. They don't have all of the other opportunities, whether it's the Napa Valley or the Monterey Peninsula. And so you want to attract that. They're viewing it as a major piece of business. The ironic part here is that, Stan Kroenke has the most money of any of the players in this situation wanting to move. And St. Louis has the most detailed plan. That is a point of concern. So they have the money because they want to attract, they want to keep the team, and doing that is building a new stadium, which the state, the city, the county will help fund.
Yeah, that kind of, I agree, because with the scenario that here St. Louis is putting together the best of the 3, and yet the Rams owner bought land in Inglewood and definitely showed that he wants to move there. Also,
well, as have the Chargers, and the Raiders, right, in Carson, in terms of saying we love Oakland, but we're going to have a backup plan if Oakland doesn't work. And right now, Oakland isn't working. There is no viable plan to build a new stadium, to finance it without public funds, with private dollars in Oakland. And I don't think the league, to Matt's earlier point, I don't think the NFL would be in favor at all of building a new multi-billion-dollar stadium 38 miles from Levi's.
But of note, last Sunday's Rams game, they had 15,000 no-shows at that game. So, and I think that kind of shows maybe the city, maybe the city wants one thing, the fans may want another. Who knows? Matt, talk about the olive branch from the NFL that that came out. It looks to me like they like the Coliseum City proposal a lot. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I don't know how much the league likes the Coliseum City proposal. I think the league is looking at ways to keep the Raiders in Oakland. Um, One, because it could simplify Los Angeles. Two, because I'm sure there are people in the league and their owners who prefer that the Raiders don't go to Los Angeles, and so the league needs to show that it's exploring every possible avenue to keep the team in Oakland. Coliseum City hasn't been proven that it's a viable business plan. Potentially it could be. We don't know how much the rights to that development are worth. There was somebody named Floyd Kephart who was willing to pay $116 million for 90 acres around the Coliseum, but then you still have all these little potential hiccups, such as the Raiders want lots of surface parking. That reduces the value of the development. So we don't really know how much Coliseum City is worth. We don't know how much the development rights are worth. So I think the league is interested in trying to explore every option to keep the team in Oakland, but it doesn't mean that they're necessarily gung-ho on partnering to build offices and hotels and homes next to a new football stadium. I don't think that's really the case.
Well, isn't it true that Mark Davis wants something nice and simple?
You want something nice and simple, 55,000 seats or so. It's still a question of how much nice and simple it really costs, especially in the Bay Area. The 49ers stadium cost $1.3 billion in the end. It was supposed to cost about $900 million, just like the Raiders stadium was supposed to cost, but it didn't. And the stadium in St. Louis, where everything is less expensive, is now projected to cost over $1 billion. So we want something nice and simple, but I don't know if we have a realistic price tag on what nice and simple is. And the city's own consultant 2 or 3 years ago thought nice and simple would cost, I think, $978 million. And now 3 years later, it's quite possible that nice and simple costs well north of $1 billion.
But do you get an impression that that the NFL wants the Raiders to stay in Oakland? Mark Davis wants to stay in Oakland. It seems like if Oakland could just put a deal together.
I'm not sure that Mark Davis wants to stay. No, Mark Davis says he wants to stay in Oakland. I think at this point he's focused on Carson, and that's kind of what's up now for him. The NFL, I just think there are folks in the league, and certainly some owners who prefer the Raiders be in Oakland. Part of that might be that they just prefer the Raiders not be in Los Angeles. There are various reasons for that. So I think, again, they're looking at different options to keep the team in Oakland, but it doesn't mean that when push comes to shove, they won't get to kind of ride shotgun with the Chargers. That's still a very real possibility.
Okay, we lost Andy there for a little bit. You're back with us, right?
I believe so.
Yes, you are.
Global warming, sunspots, or we're being hacked by some off-the-grid sports group.
Well, I asked Matt because I was getting the impression, and Matt doesn't quite think so, but I was getting the impression that the NFL wants the Raiders to stay in Oakland. Mark Davis, if he received a stadium that he likes, or I should just say Mark Davis just wants to stay in Oakland as well. If Oakland could just come up with a plan, everybody would be happy. Is that your impression?
Well, what does happy mean? That is a difficult area to define. Happy is making money. Happy is asset appreciation. Happy is new stadium. But Mark has said publicly that one of the key factors in any new stadium is tailgating, which really is a minimal point when you're talking about multi-billion-dollar stadiums. I mean, as I look at this, again, trying to separate perception from reality, the simplest way to go while increasing the value of the Raiders is either to move to Levi's, where you have no real stadium costs, or retrofit the Coliseum at a much lower cost. Mark Davis has also said he wants to play in the smallest stadium in the NFL. I'm not sure what kind of ovation that gets at NFL headquarters, but that is something that Oakland could do. We've been through so many iterations of developers of Coliseum City that have failed. I think that's a non-starter, and I don't think Oakland has the time, the wherewithal, or the team in place. And I don't mean the Raiders, I mean a business team in place to get this done.
So, who's to blame here as far as not coming up with a concrete plan? It seems to me Libby Schaaf. I mean, she went to New York, and she seems to be a little proactive, probably not totally. But who's to blame in all this?
I don't think there's anyone necessarily to blame, because if you look at most stadium projects in markets similar to Oakland, it requires a fair amount of public money, to get these stadiums built, and even if not public money, then at least some sort of public risk. You look at Minnesota, which is coming online next year. Their new stadium is going to be about half paid for by taxpayers, state and local. You look at Atlanta, that's about 20%. You look at the proposal from St. Louis, it's at almost $400 million. San Diego, about $350 million. So you can blame Libby Schaaf for not proposing hundreds of millions of dollars in public finances, or you can say that this is, someone who either doesn't believe in it, or looks at the politics and sees that it wouldn't be supported, probably couldn't get a vote in favor of it, and is just trying to cut the best deal that's politically viable. And I don't know if you blame a politician for not shelling out a lot of public money for a stadium. That said, one thing, she is proposing that development rights from around the stadium, and again, we don't know how much that's worth, could go towards the stadium. And that, I think, is, in reality, a public subsidy. We don't know how much it would really be worth. But it's not as if she's not providing any public subsidy, but it's still much lower than what the NFL is used to in a market like Oakland.
Andy, do you see any blame here as far as from the Oakland point of view?
Well, the blame game doesn't really accomplish anything, and again, we still don't know the outcome. It may very well be that the Oakland Raiders are playing at O.co for a while, and I would say if you look at the success that the 49ers have had, they spent $900 million of their own money into that stadium. Am I still with you guys?
I hear you. You're still here.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So, the 49ers have put close to $1 billion of their own money. The Warriors have said that they will privately finance what is on the board at $1 billion arena, not a football stadium or a baseball park. Vivek Ranadive and Mayor Kevin Johnson, that's a very good deal for the Kings, with a fair amount of public money, but large amount of private financing, and that's just the reality of California. So if you look at all of these entities, whether it's the city, the county, the JPA, the Raiders ownership, the league, various developers, you could easily point fingers, but this is, again, a circumstance where the city, any major city, has a mayor that has much more important issues to deal with than whether they pay hundreds of millions or billions of dollars to retain a professional sports team. And we can look at Seattle. I mean, they lost their NBA team, and they're still throwing salmon back and forth in Pike Place Market without any downside.
Okay, we have a viewer question. One is, what modifications would have to be done at Levi's Stadium to accommodate the Raiders?
Well, I think that it's there is locker room space there that was built in the original design. with LED, all you had to do was watch the Giants and the Jets play, I think last Sunday. Don't remember who the home team was, but you just push a button and one week it's green and white for the Jets, the next week it's blue and red for the Giants. All of that is easily done. Now the Niners have spent a great deal of time, effort, creativity on absolutely branding Levi's as their stadium. So there are those issues. But in terms of infrastructure, in terms of available dates, that one is relatively simple.
Okay, and had one other question. There we go. What do you think of Amy Trask's idea of even a smaller Oakland stadium, like 45,000 capacity? Is that doable?
I'll give it to Matt first.
I think that raises the question as to whether it would qualify for an NFL loan, and how much the league would back a stadium that's that small that certainly couldn't host a Super Bowl then. I think that's where you raise issues. I
never bought the smaller item concept, and I have great respect for Amy. But when Mark Davis said, I'm fine playing in a 50,000 seat stadium, right now, I believe, with the tarp, the Raiders have the smallest capacity of any team in the NFL. You're also, there's a little event occurring in Santa Clara on February the 7th. I think it's called the 50th anniversary of the Super Bowl. So if you're going to build a 50,000 seat stadium or a 40,000 seat stadium, you can forget about ever hosting a Super Bowl. And what city in their right mind would do anything to support building something that costs maybe a little bit less than $1 billion, that no way you could ever host a Super Bowl? To me, that's just completely insane.
Okay, my question is it possible to build a stadium in Oakland without public funding?
Andy.
Absolutely, positively, sure, it's possible. Look at the 49ers, look at teams around the country, look at what's happened, to other venues. It's possible, but it's not going to happen for all the reasons that we've talked about. And again, I come back to the A's, who are an extremely important linchpin to all of this. They have the most games. A's ownership and John Fisher and Lou Wolf have said repeatedly and laser focused, we can do this ourselves. We have development capabilities. We can do more than just build a stadium. But there's a standoff. The A's have been very quiet, and they're just waiting to see how the Raiders situation comes out. And the key is Oakland hasn't been nimble enough, agile enough, and entrepreneurial enough to get a plan on the books that is sustainable and long-term and financeable, as Matt said, to keep 2 of its 3 teams, because one is gone and another is hanging by a thread.
So, but you guys both agree that you don't see 3 teams moving to LA, right?
I think the NFL's been pretty clear that they want 3 teams in LA. So no.
Andy, what do you think? Do you think 3 teams can work in LA?
Well, LA's worked with no teams for 20 years, so no, there will not be 3 teams in LA.
Okay, I have another reader question. Actually, it's a comment, and then you guys can bounce back. The Coliseum cannot be renovated. The A's are there until 2018 at the earliest. Only then could they be evicted or buying out the remaining years. Renovation is a non-starter.
That's absolutely incorrect. That lease could be broken by both parties in about 15 minutes. And the Coliseum could be renovated. It has been renovated when the A's were there. That 10-year lease is flexible in many instances. So with all due respect to the viewer and the reader, renovation is absolutely something that's on the table, but I don't think it will ever happen because, at least to this point, the Raiders have said No way. So we'll see what happens when they're playing back in O.co next year, and you have an ongoing situation where the Coliseum is the last location that an NFL team and a Major League Baseball team are sharing the facility, if the Raiders are not cleared to move.
Yeah, because I can see a scenario here where let's say the city goes ahead with financing for a stadium for the Raiders, the NFL maybe helps out as a signed deal. Then the question is, I mean, what about the A's? You know, I mean, should the city accommodate the A's or?
It's certainly a puzzle. I mean, right now the A's are studying all their options, which is what they say, and John Fisher, who's the majority owner, is taking a more active look at those different options. It's unclear whether they really have an option other than the Coliseum. Lou Wolf has been adamant that the Howard Terminal site near Jack London Square isn't viable. We don't know if Fisher might have another view on that. But right now they are, I think at the city's urging as well, looking at different options. But I think there's still an expectation that after that look is over, they are still going to think that the Coliseum is the most doable location for them. And of course, the A's and the Raiders haven't really wanted to be there together in new stadiums for various reasons. So it's another puzzle piece, and it certainly complicates things.
No, I would say as I guess we get close to wrapping up, sports is all about teamwork, right? I mean, that's what we strive for. You see it being played out every day in magical fashion with the Warriors run. And in this situation in Oakland, there hasn't been teamwork. And again, without foisting blame, you have teams, you have team ownerships, you have a city, you have a county, you have a separate body in the JPA, you have a league, you have investors, you have developers, you have voters, and they haven't come up with a long-term strategic game plan to keep two remaining teams in the marketplace. And I view those teams as businesses. And if you are a city like Oakland, which is experiencing a very positive economic upturn just because of the superheated engine in Northern California, I wouldn't want to lose those three businesses potentially and have the largest flea market in California.
I have one last viewer question here. What's the chance of the A's developing on the other side of the Nimitz Freeway?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, obviously, one issue on the other side of the Nimitz Freeway is you're farther from BART. So it would, I think, be seen as a less attractive site because you are farther from BART. I think the other side of the Nimitz Freeway, there's land there that's owned by the port. So, so is Howard Terminal. So technically, it's public land. But again, you're giving the team that says they want to do it themselves the less attractive site. I don't know. I think if the A's are going to build in Oakland, they want to get the best site they can and maximize everything that they can. And I don't know if they look at the other side of the freeway as the best site.
The most positive transportation nexus, not just for sports teams, but for any kind of public access, is 66th Avenue. I mean, and that's been talked about and done for, decades. If you wanted to build that today from scratch, nobody would have the money. Nobody would have the stomach on the elected official side to do that. It already exists. To go across 880, I mean, that is one of the larger struggles that Oakland has in the development of Jack London Square. How do you basically bring together all of the opportunity on the other side of 880 to the center of the city? That one is a big challenge that affects sports, but more importantly, it affects how the city is put together and how it can move forward in development.
Okay, well, I have one last question then. Andy, what's your gut feeling? Are the Raiders leaving Oakland?
No, I'm going to be at their opening kickoff next year in O.co.
And beyond that next season?
I'll be there the season after that.
Okay. Matt, do you want to speculate?
You always ask me this. I think
I
the
don't
last
know.
time you asked me this a few months ago, I said I thought they'd be here next year, and this would just drag on forever. I'm not sure it'll still drag on forever. I think it's somewhat. I think I thought they were less likely to move 3 months ago than I do now. I still think there are a lot of obstacles in their way. But it does seem as if Carson is gained on Inglewood, and it does seem as if the owners might have different priorities than the league staff, which seems a little bit more inclined towards Inglewood. So I just think it's very up in the air right now. It's really hard to gauge.
I think Matt definitely has an insight into this because he's been covering it. I just view this, as I said before, you could do movie titles, but it's like Game of Thrones, THROWNS. That's what I think's going on here, and there's a lot more deals to be thrown on the table before the ultimate decision is made. And how ironic might it be that they don't reach a resolution at this meeting in January, but they do reach a resolution on the Raiders when the owners meet around the Super Bowl.
That will be very interesting, and I'm sure we're far from being done with this story. So we'll probably be back again doing this sometime down the road, maybe in January. So anyway, thank you very much, Andy Dolich. Thanks for joining us. Matt Artz, thank you for joining us.
Thanks. Good to see you, Andy.
Happy holidays, and support those 3 Oakland teams, and maybe the Warriors will be 82-0 to break all records.
Wearing that city uniform while they do it.
There you go. All right. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Andy.
Sure.